Hello, Clemente29 here, another Topic of the Week video. Halloween month continues with another topic about video game adaptations. This week's topic is going to be about the 2018 Tomb Raider movie. This week's topic was submitted by Andrew89 on the Discord, and her topic is, while not standalone, ignoring the games, the recent Tomb Raider movie is actually not a bad movie, and they casted the perfect actress for it. I know you're of the unpopular opinion that it's not a good adaptation of the reboot game. Please explain your reasons why you don't think that it's a good adaptation and what should be kept and what needs to be fixed. Okay, so while I think the actress that they cast for Laura was fine, it's really just an awful script she got dealt with. It's not really her fault. And while I don't blame her for any of this, I don't think this is anything close to a good movie. I don't think it's even close to a decent movie. It's just bad. Like, even ignoring just how it bungles the 2013 Tomb Raider story, the movie in and of itself is just not good. It's not enjoyable. Laura is honestly not really likable. And frankly, the movie is just boring. Now, before I get into this, I want to say something. Big spoilers for the 2018 Tomb Raider movie. Big spoilers for the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot game, as well as Rise of the Tomb Raider. I will make references to Shadow, but I'm mostly going to be talking about the 2013 game and Rise of the Tomb Raider. So, spoilers ahead for all of that. The biggest problem that I would say that the movie has is that it falls into the exact same problems that most other video game adaptations fall into. They clearly don't want to adapt the source material, so they just take only the base elements and then slap it onto a completely different story. This is only marginally better than the Resident Evil movies by Paul W.S. Anderson. The Tomb Raider movie does follow the same basic premise of the 2013 reboot Tomb Raider, in that Laura goes to Yamatai, and there's a whole story with Queen Himiko. There's a boat called the Endurance. And that's about it. Even the actual background, the lore, and the actual story itself is completely altered beyond any recognition. When the movie opens up with this really pointless narration, and it's trying to explain stuff in the story that, frankly, doesn't even matter because they're going to contradict it later in the movie anyway. It just made me think of how the game opened up in medias res. Like, the movie spends a lot of time just having Laura doing stuff and running around before she even gets to the island. The game starts in medias res. It starts with the Endurance crashing on Yamatai. You find out a little bit of what happened before a little bit later. There's a camera that Laura will look at, and it will show you some scenes of things that happened on the boat trip. So you learn a little bit about the characters through that, and you also get a little bit more context of what was going on before they crashed. Now, I understand if you want to front load that stuff, and you want to say, okay, here's the lead up to going on the Endurance, and here's the trip to Yamatai, and then the crash. I understand that. And in fact, I couldn't get behind that for a movie adaptation. You don't need to have any of these flashbacks or something telling you what happened on the trip to the Endurance. You would say, have the first beginning of the movie be Laura preparing for the trip, getting ready to go, and then the crash. A few problems with how they handle it in the movie. They spend an exorbitant amount of time on complete and total filler. It takes 32 minutes before Laura starts sailing off to Yamatai. 32 minutes. You know what that's spent on? Laura doing a bunch of crap, fighting people, riding around on a bike, trying to track down some guy who owns a boat, trying to scrounge up money for said boat, pointless action sequences, some attempts to make Laura look smart, and oddly enough, including content that was in the Croft Manor DLC for Rise of the Tomb Raider, which you might think wouldn't be that big of a deal, except it actually takes some stuff from this that was relevant to Rise of the Tomb Raider and sticks them in this, so you can't use this for that later. I just don't understand why they would do this. They were already bungling things up for Rise of the Tomb Raider, and oh, trust me, this will get worse. Now, early in the movie, we see Laura fighting in the ring with someone. You're like, okay, so this is showing Laura's tough and everything. But then I'm thinking, why not show her training with Roth? Roth is her mentor and father figure, and he's been very, very important to her. This even comes up in Rise when Laura starts talking about stuff that happened in her backstory. She talks about Roth. Roth is very important to her. Oh, but there's one little problem with that. None of the characters that are in the actual supporting cast for the Tomb Raider game are in the movie. Roth, Grimm, Sam, Jonah, Alex, Reyes, Whitman, none of them are in this movie. Some of these exclusions aren't the worst. Characters like Reyes and Grimm and even Alex aren't super necessary. I mean, there's a handful that I would consider necessary. I would say the main ones that you would probably need to have would be Roth, Sam, and Jonah. Roth is important to Laura as a character and important to her arc. Sam is actually extremely critical to the plot of the game. And Jonah becomes a consistent companion to Laura throughout this trilogy. He's in Tomb Raider, he's in Rise of the Tomb Raider, and he's in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So he's kind of a significant character. Whitman I would probably consider on the fence. I would recommend keeping him in just because he is relevant to the story. But why would you just cut all of them? I don't understand this. This is what I talked about in the last topic. When you have these writers who decide, I just want to throw out everything that's actually relevant to the games and just do something else with only the barest of resemblances to the source material. And what absolutely kills me, is that the game is already told in a very cinematic way. You have a lot of cutscenes that you can pull from. You can sort of parse through this and figure out what you should keep and what you shouldn't. Because there's a lot of stuff that's just filler, really. I mean, a lot of stuff where Laura runs off and does something and comes back. You don't really need to keep that. But there's a lot that you should keep. There is actually a good story in this game. And yes, you would need to rearrange it a bit and sort of, like I said in the last topic video, figure out what's important, what you should keep, and figure out how to adapt it to the medium of film. Like I already said, you can take a lot of the stuff that was flashbacks to the Endurance. You can put this in the beginning. And it's like, they kind of started doing that, and then they just started doing a whole bunch of other stuff that just had nothing to do with anything. Now, one thing I will say that was actually a very good idea. They bungled it, naturally. But a good idea that I must praise them for at least attempting is including Anna in the movie. Now, Anna is from Rise of the Tomb Raider. She's introduced in Rise. But she's like Laura's stepmom. She's someone who Laura has known for a long time. So it actually would make sense to introduce her here. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's actually a very good idea. Say, during the preparations for the trip on the Endurance, you see Anna. It wouldn't be all that big of a deal. It's just sort of introducing the audience to her to prep for her being in the next movie that you would think would adapt to Rise of the Tomb Raider. Now, aside from the odd change of Anna's nationality from American to British, I mean, considering the massive issues with this movie, that's a minor squabble. They actually ruin Anna's inclusion in this by spoiling the fact that she works for Trinity. Now, they introduced Trinity in this, and they're all like, oh, Trinity, Trinity, Trinity! Like, Trinity was hinted at in the first Tomb Raider game. They properly show up in Rise. But they're just hinted at in the first game. The first game's conflict is revolving around Himiko and the Solari. But this, nope. Everything is Trinity. And they spoil the plot twist that Anna is working for Trinity, and always has been. Look, when I first saw Anna, when I was playing Rise of the Tomb Raider, and I first saw Anna at the beginning of the game, I immediately said, she's working for Trinity. Now, that just may be me, but even if it is obvious, don't just slap the audience in the face with this reveal. An entire storyline before it's even relevant. It's absolutely baffling why they would just blow this way early. It's like they're so desperate to get to Rise of the Tomb Raider that they're just rushing to it at full speed, ignoring the actual story of the first game. You know, this is kind of like the problem that the live-action Bleach movie had, where it was so desperate to set up for the Soul Society arc movie that they skipped over all the actual important stuff, all the stuff that actually mattered in the substitute arc, and all the stuff that was important for the character developments, the relationship building, particularly between Ichigo and Rukia. And all of the actual setup for the Soul Society arc, like of Ichigo's friends getting powers, and really the closest of Ichigo and Rukia that's just never done in the movie, none of that's in there. They eschew all of this in favor of forcing Renji and Byakuya in the movie because they're like, look, Shinigami, Soul Society, Soul Society. Ironically, despite the fact that they're trying so hard to get to the Soul Society arc, they did nothing to actually set up the Soul Society arc. Even some key important characters are just flat out missing. And that's the same problem with Tomb Raider. They're so desperate to get to Rise, and yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in Rise, and the big conspiracy with Trinity, yeah, that's interesting and all, but that's not the story of the first game. The first game is supposed to be an origin story for Laura. She eventually starts dealing with this bigger stuff later, but the story of Himiko, that's the story for the first movie. You have this story already laid out for you, and they don't do anything with it. One of the things you can really see is the way they actually handle Laura as a character, and I really hate these changes. Now, there are a few similarities in this. Like, they established that Laura does not use her father's money. This is the same case for the game version of Laura. Neither of these versions use their father's money, but the results in their character are radically different. In the game, Laura not using her father's money was her being self-sufficient. She didn't just rely on her father's wealth that was left to her to just coast through life. She didn't even use it to pay for university. She worked her own jobs. She made her own money. She worked her butt off to go through school. This shows that Laura is driven and self-sufficient. She doesn't need all this wealth because she can make her own way in life without it. By contrast, in the movie, Laura just comes off as being petty and arrogant. She doesn't do anything with her life. She didn't go to school. She refuses to use her father's money, but she barely can seem to actually hold a real job and barely pays rent. In fact, she doesn't actually do anything until stuff starts happening to her. When the stuff with Anna comes in and discussing the inheritance that she's going to get from her father, she has to be specifically spurred into action here. A very stark contrast with the game Laura, who was very driven in doing things on her own. She was proactive as a character. It makes Laura likable. And again, by contrast, the movie Laura, I did not like her. She just kind of felt obnoxious. And in the movie, when she needed money, it was something that you really just had to ask, why don't you just dip into your father's money for this big trip to Yamatai? No, really. She's following all these clues, and like, you would think, alright, this is when she can dip into her inheritance and get the money, but no, and then she has to spend time struggling to get the money. And what's really funny is that all of this stuff was already taken care of in the backstory for the first game. The trip of the Endurance was already financed, partially by Sam's family, and partially by Dr. Whitman. The money stuff was never an issue. Now, of course, they talk about the fundings and stuff, but it's like, okay, Laura doesn't have to worry about this, so why don't you just adapt that was already in the game? It's very, very simple. This movie just, It invents stupid problems just to have a stupid solution. Over 30 minutes of screen time is just wasted on all of this nonsense. And for what? We don't really get anything of value. What? Did we really need to have that pointless chase sequence? Did we need to have that stupid bike chase? All that time could have been spent on the actual characters and actually developing the characters from the games. There are people who complain that the crew of the Endurance didn't get enough attention or development. This is your opportunity to actually fix that. If you just front load the movie with interactions with them where you get to know them, this would probably get people a lot more attached to them over the course of the story. But they don't do that. They choose to just make up their own characters. And even the ones that they do keep, they change beyond recognition. So I said that they don't keep any of the crew of the Endurance, not even the super important characters that are actually vital to the plot. That's because they replace all of them with a character named Lu Ren. I don't like Lu Ren. He's such a base, generic character. He takes the place of basically everyone in the story. He takes Roth's place, he takes Sam's place, he takes Jonah's place, he takes Grimm's place. He just even takes Alex's place. He says, why? Oh wait, did you think that consolidating all of the important roles into one new character, that's still not even all that good of a character, was going to improve the movie? If you wanted to whittle down the crew, I'd understand that. But Lu Ren just comes off as more of a plot convenience than anything. He's this guy who owns this boat, and Laura goes there and she's like, I need to use the boat. And he's like, no. And she's like, yes. And then he's like, all right, let's go. Like, okay then. And the worst part is despite the fact that Lu Ren takes the place of important characters in the game, he has none of the importance to Laura. He's not even the guy who knew her father. He's the son of that guy. So there's several degrees of separation here. So it's like you replaced Roth, who is Laura's mentor, father figure, and guardian, with some random guy. You take Jonah out, who I really like Jonah, and especially after playing Rise and Some of Shadow, going back and looking at the story of the first game, I actually came to appreciate Jonah so much more, which hurts me so much that he's gone. Literally, all of these different roles are just given to Lu Ren. And then Lu Ren basically sits around not doing much for most of the movie. So what's even the point? And what's also weird is that a couple of times it kind of felt like they wanted to make Lu Ren like a love interest for Laura. I'm like, if you wanted a love interest, you had Alex from the game. He had an obvious crush on Laura. If you wanted to give her a love interest, just keep him around. Have him survive. That would actually be kind of a nice twist from the game. If you wanted to change something, have Alex survive. I mean, a lot of people really were upset with his death, because a lot of people did like his character. If you want to have a love interest, go with him. Why would you invent this new character to take all of these roles? And even then, they don't really do much with anything with Lu Ren. He's just kind of there a lot. Another point of issue I have with the characters is what they did to Matthias. Okie dokie. Okay, so when you first meet Matthias in the game, he seems like another survivor. He just seems like a relatively normal guy. And then you realize eventually, nah, he's a villain and he's actually the leader of the bad guys. He's in control of the Solari and he's in charge of a freaking cult. Yikes. But at the very least, they do try to trick you with this at first, and I honestly thought it kind of works. I like the approach they took with Matthias in the game. He very much tricked Laura and Sam and used that to get Sam so he could use her for the ritual with Himiko. But in the movie, Matthias takes Laura and he's basically like, by the way, I'm the bad guy. I killed your dad. Like, well, okay. Well, freaking okay. Not even gonna hide it. And then that's the extent of his character. He's just a bad guy. And what's funny is that They keep his motivation of wanting to get off the island, but they just make it so much less interesting. Because in the movie, he works with Trinity. Because of course he does. Because everything has to be Trinity. And his motivations for getting off the island are, I'm on a job, I'm tired of this, I just want to get out, I want to leave the island. And that's it. He's basically a businessman with a gun who's tired of the job he's on. Now, in the game, Matthias was a survivor who got stuck on the island decades ago. He's been on the island for decades. He's gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And he does want to get off the island. He wants to survive. And he thinks that the only way to do that is to help Himiko find her new host. Which, while crazy, you can understand the logic. Himiko is causing these storms. So if you satisfy her, then you would think, all right, storms are done, I can leave now. You can at least follow that logic, even if he's crazy and he's, killing a bunch of people to get to this. But Matthias in the movie, he's just generic. And the whole stuff with, I killed your dad, it's like, oh, just okay. And this is going to be even dumber when you find out later that Laura's dad is alive. He's not alive in the game. No, he is DED dead. He got Minecrafted by Trinity. And it's so annoying that just halfway through the movie, he just shows up and Laura just goes, oh, Dad, you're here. He's like a crazy hermit, and then they try to be emotional. And okay, I can be a sucker for the child finds their lost parent after they've been stuck someplace for years thing. I can understand the appeal. I actually do like that idea, but not for this. Because in the story of the games, Richard Croft is dead. This is important for the story. While Laura does have some daddy issues, it doesn't affect her in the game nearly as much as it affects Laura in the movie. And then they kill him off at the end of the movie anyway, in a big sacrifice, so then I'm just like, what's the point of even bringing him back? And then they change his focus of his character to be almost entirely about Yamatai. Entirely about Himiko. Well then, what are you going to do in Rise when he had all of that focus on finding the divine source? What about all of that work that Laura does to try to prove her father was right about stuff by getting the divine source? And all the drama that ensued from that. Laura's entire character arc from Rise of the Tomb Raider is shot because of what this movie is doing. You can't adapt Rise of the Tomb Raider. You've basically stripped all of the potential storylines in that away. Some of them were put in here haphazardly, and some have just been shot in the foot before they even got a chance to get to the starting line. Laura meets her dad and gets to resolve things with him a bit before he sacrifices himself. I'm like, okay, you didn't need to do that. Because Laura in the game already came to accept that her father was right about a lot of the supernatural stuff that she at first disbelieved in before meeting Himiko and actually saw her almost possess Sam. Yeah. We already did this arc in the game and it was better. And I've looked at the video game movie videos on YouTube for Tomb Raider. The ones that take all of the cutscenes and splice a little bit of gameplay in between to sort of link them. And the ones I saw for Tomb Raider were a bit over 2 hours long. I'm like, okay, that's about what you get for a movie. So that's the length you have to work with. Then you could add stuff at the beginning, and you'd obviously have to make some cuts and changes. And what kills me is you already have a starting point. You just need to adapt what's already there. You don't even need to invent new stuff. You can come up with a few new things here and there. But if you play the games, you get a story. The 2013 Tomb Raider game has a good story. And any of the issues that it has, you can fix. One of the things that people have complained about is that Laura kills a guy for the first time in the game, freaks out over it, and then ends up killing a bunch more people. Which, I can kind of see where they're coming from with that. It's not really that big of a deal. But you can fix that. You can properly portray Laura becoming more comfortable with killing, which in fact leads into something Matthias says later on in the game when he tries to confront Laura about, oh, all the people you've killed to survive, I'm just doing the same thing. And this also leads into an interesting point about Laura's character in Rise of the Tomb Raider, because she has become more comfortable with this. And in fact, there's even a point where she's at one of the campfires and she's thinking about, how she was taught to shoot and stuff, and she almost sounds resentful of the fact that, oh, she's used guns so much and killed so many people that, learning all this stuff from Roth, I learned that a little too well. It's an interesting little bit about Laura's character that you really could have built up in this first movie and then taken that into the adaptation for Rise of the Tomb Raider. But we don't get that. We just get some scenes that are just haphazardly thrown in. And what kills me is that you have some scenes that either have direct equivalents or are almost shot for shot copied. And it's like, why are you picking these things out when you completely throw out the whole main plot? It's the same thing with the Resident Evil movies using specific characters or monster designs or whatever from the games, and then keeping nothing else from the games. It's an adaptation in only the most superficial ways, and that really describes Tomb Raider. It's an adaptation in the most superficial of ways. The most important and damaging change that this movie made from the game's story is that it completely strips out all of the supernatural stuff. Okay, it's actually a point that the supernatural stuff exists because they think it's crazy, they doubt a lot of this stuff in the games, and at the end Laura does come to understand what her father told her, that the supernatural stuff really does exist and he was looking for this stuff, that he wasn't just crazy out of his mind. This is something that then comes back in Rise of the Tomb Raider, where Laura is desperately trying to prove her father right, to prove he wasn't a loon, and that to prove him, even posthumously, to have been someone who actually had a point. But nope, this movie takes all of that and it just throws it out the window. Okay, in the game, you find out more of the stuff about Himiko and the stuff about the island as the story goes on. There are a few major points where they start explaining stuff and Laura is figuring things out. Because she starts piecing together what she finds in the ruins on Yamatai, and she starts piecing this all together. At first thinking that Himiko passed on her powers to a successor, she's like, okay, so there's some sort of succession ritual. No, not quite. She figures out that Himiko would actually take a woman, and she would bodyjack her. Not just giving her her power, but transferring her soul to that and taking over that body. And she kept doing this over and over and over. It was a form of immortality. Which, that whole thing is actually important to the story going into Rise of the Tomb Raider and the divine source and the story of the prophet and his immortality. Which is also important, especially when you start digging into the Croft Manor DLC, is super important to what Richard Croft was looking for, especially after the death of his wife. Because when Laura's mother died, he wanted to find a way to literally resurrect her. This is an entire subplot that you could have really dug into. But nope, since we've stripped the supernatural elements out of this story, you can't have any of that. No, seriously. There's so much freaking supernatural stuff in Rise of the Tomb Raider. There's legitimately no way you can adapt it with the same way you're doing this, unless you take the same scorched earth approach and just replace everything with complete nonsense. I mean, this whole thing is why Sam is important. Sam is who Himiko chooses as her new vessel. This is why Matthias is trying to use her, and he tries to get her to be the new Himiko, as Himiko transfers her soul into Sam. Laura ends up stopping this. She kills Matthias, she kills Himiko, and the storms stop. Because the storms were caused by Himiko, who was trying to strand people on the island so she could have someone that she could take over. But with that supernatural explanation gone, there's no explanation for why all these ships and boats have crashed on Yamatai other than, it's just one of those things like the Bermuda Triangle. Like, the game came up with an explanation for this. And this is why they had to stop Himiko before they could get off the island. They tried to get help several times, but every time they got a plane or a helicopter, they would end up being crashed by the storms because they were supernatural. What does the movie do? Well, the movie starts leading you to believe that the whole stuff with Himiko is supernatural and, it's like the game. They even have an opening narration that's so pointless because, we're going to introduce you to the stuff about Himiko, but guess what? It doesn't matter because we're going to change it later in the movie anyway. So Himiko in the game is evil. She's a monster. She is entirely selfish. She doesn't give a crap about anyone else. The only reason she was stopped in the first place was because the person that she was going to transfer to figured things out and killed herself before Himiko could do it, which left her trapped in a corpse, which is why she created the storms. In the movie, they start leading you to believe that's the case, and then they're like, no, Himiko was actually a really good person, and she had some virus something that turns people into zombies, kinda, and she sealed herself away because she wanted to save everyone. So not only did they scrap all of the actual story from the Tomb Raider game, not only did they scrap all of Himiko and whitewash her to be some sort of altruistic hero, they're also copying the ending of the first Uncharted game. And if you're copying the Uncharted game story, you're not doing any good. Because those games all have terrible stories. Especially the first one, where at the end it's just like, by the way, zombies, out of nowhere. And that's what happens here. I'm like, wait, why are you doing this? The new Tomb Raider games are already Uncharted, but actually good. And they're just like, let's just copy a bad plot point from a mediocre game. It's not interesting. It doesn't enhance the story. In fact, it just makes it dumber. Because you expect all this supernatural stuff, and at the end it's just like, it's not really supernatural. I mean, this isn't like the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie. Like, the first one makes you think that a lot of the stuff is supernatural, and then they ultimately reveal that it's nothing more than tricks and smokes and mirrors. But that works because it's a detective movie. It's, it's setting up the story and then it reveals the truth. This isn't handled with even half of the care that movie was. They had a story already laid out for them. There is relatively minimal work that had to go in adapting it. You had to make changes. You had to figure out how to change things up to make it into a 2-hour movie. And they just decided to gut the story. This isn't just changing a few things. This isn't taking out some plot points to make the story a little bit shorter so that it fits into the 2-hour movie length. This is literally looking at the game and going, let's just do something else. Now, if they were taking the base ideas of the reboot Tomb Raider games, of giving Lara Croft an origin story, and they did an entirely different story, something totally unrelated, well, I wouldn't really be satisfied with that because I do really like these games and I would love to see an actual movie made on them, and I would love to see actually good movies adapting these games. I would be more understanding on if they did that because they wanted to tell a different story, rather than taking all of the trappings of the first Tomb Raider game and then just making a movie that's totally unrelated to it, and then changing everything to the point where it's completely unrecognizable. I have seen people say that this is the greatest video game movie of all time, one of the best adaptations of a video game ever made, and I have to ask, what are these people smoking? Because you cannot play the game and then watch the movie and say, that movie is a great adaptation. It's not. At all. Not even in the slightest. It's a terrible adaptation. It's one of the worst adaptations I've ever seen. So why are people saying that it's amazing? Because the only conclusion I can draw from that is someone who says that either hasn't played the game or didn't actually watch the movie. I actually had a little bit of hope when I started watching the movie for the first time because I'd heard so many good things about it. And then I watched it and I'm like, that was awful. That was just awful. I hated it. And I hate it now. And after rewatching the movie and then going back to the first Tomb Raider game and checking out the entire story of that again, I'm even more mad. I can see even more parts where they either lifted scenes, plot points, or lines straight up and then misused them. Rewatching this movie was a chore. And there's so many little things that they just get wrong, along with the big things. Like, okay, Laura uses a bow and arrow in the game. It's kind of a big point. Laura uses bows a lot. In the movie, Laura exclusively uses her bow. There are points in the movie where she'll literally just walk over guns and ignore guns from guys that she just killed with a bow and arrow. And like, okay, there's a freaking assault rifle right there. Pick it up and use it. That's what Laura does in the game. She picks up weapons and she uses them. She gets a pistol, an assault rifle, and a shotgun along with her bow and arrow. You have a selection of weapons. Now, I'm not saying Laura had to lug around an entire arsenal of weapons, but using them a little bit would have been fine. And she could at the very least keep a pistol on her. But no, she just goes with the bow and arrow the whole time because she uses the bow and arrow in the game, right? It's just so superficial. And the climbing axe that she uses in the games, which has kind of become iconic to the games, Laura doesn't even pick one of these up until near the end of the movie. We're talking about the last 15-20 minutes of the movie. And she doesn't use one at all to climb until maybe the last 10 minutes of the movie. Last 5-10 minutes. Laura has the climbing axe on the cover of the game. This is something that's used a lot in all of the games, very consistently. And it's actually really fun to use in the games, especially when they start adding a lot more stuff to do with it, like in Rise of the Tomb Raider and in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And it's thrown in as almost like an afterthought. This movie really shows that whoever was making it did not care. I feel bad for the actors involved. Some of them were really miscast. The actress for Laura, and I can see her being a good Lara Croft in a better movie. If she was given an actual script, if she actually was in a movie that was adapting the actual story of the game, I think she could actually do a good job. I don't know if she would be the perfect actress for it, but I'm not going to knock her because this isn't her fault at all. I think she did the best with what she had, which was a grand stinking total of nothing. But this is just another example of a video game movie being made by people who don't give a flying crap. And it's like, they even end it with a cliffhanger of, oh, by the way, Anna works with Trinity. Like, this is going to be a sequel hook. The existence of Trinity was a sequel hook in the original Tomb Raider, but then they already introduced Trinity, so now they're like, no, we gotta step it up. Let's spoil a plot twist from the next game. Yay. Good writing, guys! The game is just terrible. And it's a disappointment, because I know some people don't like the new Tomb Raider games. I love them. I love the new Tomb Raider games. I especially love the reboot game. Maybe a bit more gritty than what people would expect from Tomb Raider, really. But I really enjoyed it, and I really like the story. And seeing it gutted like this and thrown into a half-baked adaptation by people who clearly don't care, it hurts me inside. It hurts. And I really do hope that people stop praising this movie, because it's not good. Even just as a movie itself, even if you haven't played the game, it's just a bad movie. And I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Not even to get people interested in the game, because honestly, I would literally just say play the game. It's infinitely better. The Tomb Raider 2018 movie, it was a disappointment. It's it's garbage. And I sure as hell hope they don't ever try to touch Rise of the Tomb Raider. Well, I think that's about it for this topic. If you want to submit a topic to me, you can comment below if you're on YouTube. If you're on Tumblr, you can send me an ask, put topic : whatever topic you want me to talk about. Or if you're on the Discord, you can go into the topic submissions channel and just submit a topic there. Just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. What are your thoughts on the Tomb Raider movie or the 2013 reboot game? Please comment below. And thank you for watching.